Welcome everyone. I'm Mark Fox, CEO of NetEvents, and I'd like to thank the US and international media for joining today's session on making multi-cloud and hybrid cloud work. Chairing today's roundtable is Brad Casemore, Vice President of Research for Datacenter and Multicloud Networking at IDC. We also have two of the big guns of the industry joining us here today. We have Vijoy Pandey, Vice President of Engineering and CTO of Cloud at Cisco, plus Oliver Cantor, Director of Verizon Global. In addition, we have two of the hottest cloud startups right now. We have Amir Khan, President, Founder and CEO of Alkira. Amir previously founded SD-WAN pioneer Viptela, which he sold in 2017 to Cisco for $610 million. Plus, we have Steve Mullaney, President and CEO of Aviatrix. Steve was interim CEO of Palo Alto Networks, and then he was also CEO of SDN pioneer Nicira. He sold that company for $1.26 billion. So I'm sure you'll agree, a fantastic lineup for today's session. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Brad Casemore to chair the session. Brad, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark, and it's my pleasure to be here hosting such a great panel. We're going to be talking about a very important topic today, and each of the panelists will be able to provide very useful perspectives and helpful perspectives for you, the audience, and it'll help you understand the need out there that enterprises have in the marketplace and how they're addressing it. So I look forward to today's discussion. And with that, we're going to present some contextual slides that set the table, so to speak, for the panelists, and then they will provide you with some lively and very substantive discussion. So let's start at the beginning. It's a great place to start, and let's start by defining our terms. What is multi-cloud networking? At IDC, we see multi-cloud networking as a critical support for distributed enterprise workloads. We all know that we've entered, as a result of digital transformation, a cloud era where more and more enterprises are harnessing the cloud. They're harnessing the cloud for agility. They're harnessing the cloud for flexibility. They're harnessing the cloud for perceived cost savings. And increasingly, as a result of the pandemic we've all been living through and we're hoping to get out of in the not too distant future, they're also leveraging cloud for business resilience and continuity, for digital resilience and continuity. So as these workloads in this multi-cloud and hybrid world begin to proliferate across clouds, this is really what multi-cloud networking supports. It helps to make it happen. It helps to make it effective, and it helps to make it valuable for these enterprises. And of course, these workloads are distributed across IaaS clouds. They're on private clouds. They're across, in some cases, industry clouds, depending on the vertical. So how you achieve multi-cloud networking is through making it simple, because this is an inherently complex proposition, right? You're dealing with you're dealing with discrete clouds. You're dealing with disparate APIs associated with each cloud. You're dealing with different service insertion models. You're dealing with different network constructs, and it is difficult. In fact, what we found at IDC in our surveys and our discussion with enterprises is that frequently organizations that are moving to cloud, and they've already moved to a single cloud, look at some of the infrastructure issues, and particularly the network issues that relate to multi-cloud, and they find them daunting. They find them intimidating, and it actually has become somewhat of an inhibitor to them fully leveraging multi-cloud for business benefits and outcomes. So the idea is to make this simple, to make it very cloud-like in terms of being on demand, elastically scalable, highly available and secure, all the things that you've come to associate with cloud singular, but making it cloud plural. And this is not a trivial task. There's a lot of abstractions involved to make it simple, but it's absolutely critical for enterprises if they're to fully achieve their objectives around embracing and leveraging multi-cloud. And as I said, it includes these abstractions that are needed to simplify networking to and across different clouds. And of course, as a result of that, multi-cloud networking should deliver operational agility and efficiency. It should have all the visibility that's necessary across clouds, to clouds and across clouds. And it should deliver actionable insights, because in the cloud era, we've not only become used to things being on demand, but things being available when we need them. And they have to continue to be available. And as a result, it's not just day zero and day one, to use a kind of life cycle term, but you should also have the ability to have fast troubleshooting and remediation of any issues that do arise that affect application availability and performance. And as a result of that, you should be able to get more proactive in your operations, in your infrastructure operations. In other words, as a result of a robust multi-cloud networking and a capable multi-cloud network infrastructure, you should be able to basically anticipate and sense problems before they become disruptions or outages. And at the end of the day, what's it about, right? From a business perspective, a multi-cloud networking is essential. It's absolutely imperative to having a flexible foundation and a elastically scalable foundation for the realization of connected clouds, truly connected clouds. You need a networking connectivity model for that. So this is an extremely important topic, and I'm really pleased to be here today to have our panelists hold forth on this very important topic. And as we move on to the next slide, why it matters, a little more about why it matters. Well, we know clouds today. Cloud has become a force in the industry, a very significant and hugely transformational force. It's not only a destination for workloads, but it certainly is that. But it's increasingly an operating model and a set of technologies. At IDC, we see enterprises going through a transition to what we call a cloud-centric operating model, where not only the infrastructure is cloud-like, but the operating model is too. And it includes all the agility, flexibility, speed, intelligence that you would expect from really leveraging cloud technologies fully. And of course, at the end of the day, it's a key means. When we think about cloud in its various forms, it's a key means through which enterprises achieve and realize digital transformation. That's how they're doing it. And one thing I would, you probably noticed that my title used to be VP of Research at IDC for data center networking, but the data center, the whole concept of the data center has been changed. It's become distributed, right? Because that's where the workloads are. And we think about data centers and you think about the data center networks that support them, it was always in service to the servers, which of course hosted the applications. Well, now the applications, the workloads are distributed. Some of them, certainly many customers today still have on-premises workloads, but the growth is increasingly on the cloud side. They're adding more and more cloud workloads over time. These are refactored applications. These are new applications in many cases. These are cloud native applications that are built on a premise of containers and microservices. And that's where the growth is, right? And so as a result of that, the data center is distributed. It's become, some vendors talk about this as centers of data rather than a data center. But the important thing to remember here, and why a multi-cloud networking is so essential, is because of this distribution of applications and workloads across a multi-cloud landscape. And the network has to be able to support that. We effectively need a new architecture and a new approach to networking to support that. And that's really what we're seeing out there today in the marketplace. And at the end of the day, again, it's about business outcomes, and it's also about enhancing digital experiences associated with application access. So you have the support for the workloads, which are increasingly distributed, and you also have, of course, a richer digital experience as a result of that. And if we move to the next slide, I just want to say a little more about that access piece. There are multi-cloud networking. It's I said earlier, it's an inherently complex undertaking, and it's incumbent on the vendors you're going to hear from today and the suppliers you're going to hear from today to simplify the task. But there are multi-cloud networking adjacencies, and a complete multi-cloud network from a customer perspective also needs to address that application experience. Application and access and digital experience is certainly a dimension of it. And you have the workloads and you have the access to applications and the experience that accrues from it. And it's very important for this to be secure, right? So you have to ensure that you have consistent secure policies for network insecurity and connectivity insecurity out to these multiple clouds, and you have to ensure that the applications are delivered securely. And multi-cloud networking access is currently being addressed in many ways, but certainly many SD-WAN vendors are providing solutions for the last mile at the enterprise edge. We see partnerships have formed between some SD-WAN vendors and cloud core interconnection and multi-cloud networking vendors, and certainly major network providers are partnering in this field with both SD-WAN vendors and some of the newer multi-cloud networking vendors. And some multi-cloud networking vendors today are either partnering with SD-WAN vendors, or they are capable of integrating SD-WAN into their own offerings. And that'll be an interesting development to watch as we move forward for competitive reasons and for customer value reasons. And cloud-centric networks, these are all cloud network, are designed around applications and workloads, as I said earlier. So really, what's happening in terms of cloud and applications and workloads, that really is the driving force for this. But what this means as we move into a more cloud native world is that there will be a transference of perceived value from the lower layers in the networking stack, which of course have been with us for and are still with us. I mean, these aren't going away, but there'll be a transference of value to the higher layers of the stack, the application layer and layer 7. Certainly as we move into cloud native, where you're dealing with Kubernetes, you're dealing with containers and microservices, you're dealing with things like API gateways, ingress controllers, and within clusters, service mesh. It's becoming a more API driven and app driven connectivity construct. And I think vendors, if they haven't addressed that today, will be addressing it in the future, because that's absolutely critical in this whole space. So you've probably gotten the takeaway that it is complex, and it's essential. Enterprises need to do this, but it's complex, can be daunting, and vendors in this space are trying to make it easier for enterprises. They are trying to help them achieve their objectives around multi-cloud, and the network can't be ignored here. We've seen enterprises who have just assumed that they had what was necessary to do this well, and they've learned that they didn't, and they had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to achieve their objectives. So I would say this is sometimes an underappreciated facet when organizations move on a multi-cloud path, but it's absolutely critical. And I think with that, we will move to the next slide, and we'll get to some of the discussion. Before we do that, and we're going to talk about multi-cloud and multi-cloud networking and how significant it is for customers and for the industry at large and what they need to do. But before we do that, I want to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and provide a bit of context about their organizations and what they do. So briefly, I'd like to, I'll basically go across my screen in terms of how I'm seeing each of you gentlemen today. Oliver, I wonder if you could provide a brief intro, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brad. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Oliver Cantor. I'm at Verizon, and I've been here a long time. And hopefully most people in the audience know who Verizon are. And I sit in the Verizon business group, so I'm dealing with enterprise, the largest enterprise customers, in the US and globally. And, we have and have been providing for years a very large IP backbone, IP network. And of course, in the US, all of our consumer services as well, and moving right now, of course, rapidly into 5G and beating the 5G drum very hard. But, we're very interested in this space. We're very interested, of course, for our customers, and you described it very well, the evolution of what networking is, right? It's been evolving for years, and it will continue to evolve. And the clever people on this panel have started companies that are looking hard at these, the nitty gritty, right? Of, in the past, you could say that networks connected islands of compute together, LANs and, telephone exchanges and other things. And but what are they connecting together now? Well, workloads really, workloads are moving, right? Data's moving, users are moving, everything's on the move. So as we transition from this kind of this static world of static digitization that's really been occurring for a number of years, we're moving into a dynamic digitization. And dealing with multi-cloud, dealing with these complexities is exactly what we've got to keep abreast of. So it's a pleasure to be. It's a pleasure to be on the panel with these guys. So that's me.
Thanks very much, Oliver. And now we're going to move over to Steve Mullaney. Steve, please tell us a bit about what's happening at Aviatrix and how you're addressing this space.
Steve Mullaney, CEO of Aviatrix, longtime networking person. I been in networking since 1985. I was at Synoptics in the early days. I was an Ethernet designer even before 10BASE-T. So I actually worked on 10BASE-T. So I saw the last great computing transformation of mainframes to client server. And that's really what the model of computing that we've been building for the last 30, 35 years. As you mentioned, I was the first VP of marketing at Palo Alto Networks. I was interim CEO for a while. I was the CEO of Nicira, created a software-defined craze. We got bought by VMware. I was at VMware for a few years, and then I retired. I was done. That was it. I had a great career. And for 5 years, I was just on boards, and infrastructure was boring. We've been talking about cloud for 15 years, and honestly, enterprises weren't moving. And that's where the money always has been and always will be with enterprises. And then I noticed 2 years ago, what I call the Cambrian explosion to cloud, where every enterprise finally said, now we mean it. And they'd been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And 2 years ago, they said, okay, now we're doing it. And every enterprise, as we all know, they move like a pack of buffalo. They move like a herd. They all do the same thing on the same day. And they all decided, they locked arms and said, we're now going to move to cloud. And I looked and I said, my God, okay, we've now started. Mark that in your calendars. 2 years ago on a Tuesday, I remember the day, we've entered the cloud computing phase as a model of computing, and it's happening. We've got over 500 customers. We've got significant enterprises in every single vertical, names that your moms know. It's crazy, and every single vertical has now gone and said 2 years ago, that is the center of gravity of our architecture. It is no longer the data center. You said it, Brad. It's not about the data center, right? It's not about, that's why you see SD-WAN's dead. Why? Because it's not about going back to the data center. It's about going to the centers of data that are in the cloud. That is the center of architecture. And where Aviatrix comes in is people don't want to go back to the horrific operational model of the 90s. They want a cloud native solution with the agility, the simplicity, the Terraform automation. It has to be that DevOps model. So I can't take my Ciscos and Junipers and Aristas of the world and jam them into the cloud. I need a cloud native solution. However, I'm BNY freaking Mellon. I'm like the government. I need the visibility, the security controls that I used to have on-prem. And how do I do that combination? And that's where Aviatrix comes into play. And then where we really come into play, it's not just the first level problem is to get to the cloud. People think that's the problem. Actually, that's not the problem. That's level 1. Level 10 is once you're in the cloud, and we'll talk about this as we go through this webcast, but that's where Aviatrix really plays, is the entire networking for you as you move your center of gravity to cloud.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. And now we'll move to Amir Khan from Alkira. Amir, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Alkira. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me on the show. So I also go back almost to the mid 80s in the networking industry, and have been bringing out leading solutions to the market, including Viptela recently, where we pioneered the SD-WAN space. And I took a year off after the company was acquired by Cisco, and decided to look into the next big problem in the industry. And we saw a couple of trends. One was that cloud resources are enormous, and they were born in the cloud businesses, which were scaling to hundreds of millions of consumers, and also in the networking space, applications were getting delivered and they were scaling to enormous scale. And networking was lagging, right? Networking had not adopted the cloud. And we can build networks in the cloud for the cloud, which can solve majority of the problems that the customers run into today. And what we saw an opportunity was that you no longer need to build those routers anymore, because the future, it will be software driven. And we had already done, to a certain extent, brought solutions based on software to the market. It needs to be done as a service, right? And the second major piece was when we started looking deeper into how each one of the cloud providers was providing networking capabilities. They were different. The nuances were different, and limitations were different. So we had to build the infrastructure in the cloud to solve those problems, because otherwise all those underlying nuances and details were being exposed to the customers, and multi-cloud environments were not being adopted at the pace that it needs to be. To the point where we made an announcement yesterday with Microsoft. The cloud providers feel that what we are doing allows the industry to accelerate adoption of the cloud and of the multi-cloud environment, right? That's enormous, right? And so you need to have a ubiquitous solution which seamlessly spans across multiple clouds and your hybrid environments and your remote users, right? And allows you to bring higher layer services together in a seamless manner, which has not happened today. And the only way you can do it is by building the solutions which are horizontally scalable and which are cloud native and which provide all the details to the large enterprises, right? From routing controls to day 2 visibility to change control to compliance, and so that they can meet the compliance and governance requirements. And those types of solutions did not exist. At best, what you see was people orchestrating things together in clouds, but not necessarily providing what's needed by the enterprise. And that's what we bring to the table, is a very comprehensive solution deployed by the largest enterprises in the world across the globe, as well as, because we are a multi-tenant solution, think of it as we are the future service provider for enterprises, and we allow enterprises to scale. That's what we bring to the table, and that's why there's such an accelerated adoption of our technology and solution in the market.
Thank you very much, Amir. And last but not least, nobody's least on this panel. I want to introduce Vijoy Pandey to talk about how Cisco sees multi-cloud networking and what they're doing in the space. Vijoy.
Thank you, Brad, and it's a pleasure to be here. A fun panel indeed. I should say we started out with a bang. By the way, Steve, I think it was a Wednesday. I don't think it was Tuesday, if I remember correctly. But I agree with that sentiment there. I think the way we look at multi-cloud is, in the end, there are applications and there are users, and nothing else really matters. And all of us are in the service of apps and users. And what's happening on the application side is these big behemoths, these monoliths are being split apart, their guts are being taken out, and they're being strewn across the wide open internet. That's what's happening. And you talked about the cloud native phenomenon. That's exactly what's happening. There's no longer a big Oracle behemoth sitting somewhere on a bare metal. There are services and APIs, and people are building apps using these services and APIs scattered anywhere. Either public cloud providers, which is what most people are talking about here, or SaaS. I mean, a bunch of customers we talk to, most of the apps, 90% of the APIs being used are SaaS APIs. And then there are, of course, cloud backends and on-prem entities and so on and so forth. So in this kind of a distributed application environment, where the network is really the runtime for all of these apps, your connectivity, full stack connectivity from the API layer, app layer, to the cloud native layer, virtualization, bare metal. So full stack connectivity, full stack security, full stack observability, because if something goes wrong, is it the network's fault? Which is what everybody thinks first. Yeah, it's the network's fault. But it's Typically not. I mean, we've seen situations where you see latencies going up, and it's actually a RAM element on a database server that's actually causing that problem. So just going through and driving full stack connectivity, full stack security, and full stack observability is how at least Cisco sees the world. And to your point earlier, I mean, yes, data centers of data, to me, actually, the whole sheet metal and brick and mortar is an illusion. It really doesn't matter. What really matters are APIs and data objects. And that's what you need to connect. That's what you need to secure, regardless of where they happen to be. And yes, you need to have defense in depth. So you need to secure below that and all the way down to the bare metal. But that's where you need to start. And that's at least how we see the world. One last comment before I move on, and sorry about this, Steve, but there's a lot of Juniper and Cisco shoved inside of the data of the hyperscalers as well. I've been there. I've run Google's networks for 5 years. There's a lot of Cisco and Juniper there, but I agree what you mean. By taking traditional architectures and trying to retrofit it is not going to work. I agree with that sentiment.
Thanks very much, Vijoy, and thanks to all the panelists for the introductions. And then we'll move on to discussing, the impact that multi-cloud and of course the need for having to do multi-cloud networking and support multi-cloud networking connectivity, about the impact that's having on the industry and on customers. We can take it from either perspective, but clearly customers have been grappling with this. I wonder if you could provide some perspective, each of you, and maybe we'll start with we'll kind of move it in one. We'll start with Steve. Steve, if you could talk about, how you see them grappling with this in terms of their challenges and their most acute problems, and what this means for the solutions that need to be provided for them.
Yeah, so I think everyone here is in agreement that the customers are, they're being, this is a business transformation. This is not a technology transformation. This is about the applications and its start. I think the thing for me is, has anybody been to a sandals resort? Brad, have you ever been to Sandals?
I have not, but I know people who have, so I'll say that.
Well, Sandals, you look at the brochure and it looks fantastic. Oh my God, all you got to do is get there, and we have sailboats and we have food and we have wine. This is fantastic. So this is the marketing pitch of the CSPs, of the hyperscalers. So they say, all you got to do is get here. We will do everything and anything you ever need in terms of networking and network security. And then enterprises go, oh my God, this is wonderful. I'm gonna have such a great time. You get to Sandals and you realize there's one sailboat. There's 400 people trying to reserve the sailboat. And we'll give you the 4:30 a.m. slot on Monday, Mr. Mullaney, if you'd like to take that boat. And then you go to the food and it's a buffet style. And when you have wine, there's red wine and white wine. And you say, well, what kind of red wine? No, you don't understand, Mr. Mullaney. We got red wine. Well, let me order off the menu. Can I get a bottle of cap? No, we don't have any of that on the island. This is what you get. And so the difference between the brochure and the reality, and that's what happens to enterprises, is it's the Sandals style. They get to the cloud, they've been sold a bill of goods, and they realize there's so much complexity, so much that is manual, even within one cloud. And so they get there, and that's why I say the access and the connectivity is a pedestrian view of the cloud. That is just step one. There's 9 more steps. Once you get there, you realize the level of complexity and you go, oh crap. My CEO thinks cloud is clicky, clicky, clicky. They fired half of my staff. I don't really understand cloud. And I'm now in the AWS I started with. And oh, by the way, the business decides what cloud I'm going to go in, not the infrastructure. And the business has said, good news. We're now in GCP because of their ML capabilities. We're in Oracle because I'm moving my Exadata database, and Larry Ellison has made it very easy for me to move that. And of course, I'm going to run that in OCI. And I've got Office 365 and Active Directory, and I'm using that for Azure. And oh, by the way, I'm going into China, so I've got Alibaba. You get the point. So now it's 4 or 5 different public clouds. And oh, by the way, agility is now part of the word mission critical for these enterprises. You don't get to say, what year do I want that service? It's next week. And so welcome to my nightmare as an infrastructure team. And so it's not that these apps are spread across multiple clouds. No one's dumb enough to do that. Multi-cloud is, I have this app running in that cloud, I have that app running in that cloud. Enterprises will always run the app where it runs best. And if that means GCP, that means GCP. And the infrastructure team, I say jump, you better say how high. And I get it tomorrow. And so what they're looking for is a common architecture that I can deploy that abstracts away the difficulties and the complexities and the shortcomings of all the individual clouds. And they're all different, right? But gives me a common set of enterprise services and controls and visibility across this entire infrastructure of multiple clouds plus on-prem. That's the challenge that every infrastructure team across the world is dealing with.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. Amir, what are you seeing in your experiences? Are you seeing something similar?
Yes, Brad, very similar to that. And majority of the customers that we are deploying our solution into have a similar problem where they want to, let's say, consume Active Directory from Azure, but they may be sitting in multiple clouds and on-premise locations. And so you need to seamlessly connect all these environments so that they can consume those services sitting in the cloud, right? And the challenge so far has been that, as Steve alluded to it, building distributed applications has been a huge issue in the market. It's not that people don't want to build it, it's just that to build the infrastructure to support those applications is so difficult. And and then there is the data gravity issue, right? Because data resides closest to the application, and you cannot have the application far from that data. And so once you bring these environments together in a seamless manner, right, now it opens up new opportunities for you to start thinking about how to evolve your microservices architectures, right? And we are starting to see some of the customers grapple with those ideas now. But I totally agree that certain applications, they run better in certain clouds, and they may be more cost effective to run in those clouds. And that's how customers want to deploy them today. And in the future, they want to start to experiment with how we can distribute our applications better going forward. Now, having said that, the key is that you need to have a common infrastructure, and the customers are struggling with security, right? Today, the way things are done, because there's a hodgepodge of stuff, right? You have to stitch all these instances together in the legacy environments, right? Where you bring in either a Cisco virtual router and tie it together with a Palo Alto through tunnels. And then on top of that, create static policies, etc. And by the way, you cannot even do simple, routing or segmentation across these environments properly, right? People are doing it based on static policies, right? And so how do you bring this environment together so that you have a network which moves at the speed that the business wants to move, right? Not having to understand the nitty-gritty details of how each individual environment works. It reminds me of the early days of the internet standards, right? Remember in the 80s and in the 90s, we used to have 16 or 20 protocol suites, whether it was DECnet or DECnet, AppleTalk, XNS, Novell IPX, and TCP/IP was a small piece of the equation, right? And over time, TCP/IP won, and we started standardizing. That's when we saw the competition and the industry flourished, right? We are still at the early stages of clouds evolving. There's no standardization, right? There is no consolidation, right? So what the customer is stuck with is learning all the nitty-gritty details of each one of these environments, and that enormously makes their life difficult. And that's what we are bringing to the table as the new age companies, is to solve that problem and provide a common solution which is very clean, so that you can improve your security posture and you can improve your services posture at the higher layers, and at the same time be able to provide day two operations and routing controls or whatever is needed to build this environment in a seamless manner. And that's missing from the equation today. Now, having said that, I will go back to Vijay's point also, that yes, we need to move higher to the API level, to the end nodes, or whether it's containers or serverless or VMs. But the reality is, you will still talk to some customers who are running mainframes, They haven't gone away, right? So how do you bring this environment together so that the old applications, the way they consume, resources, they are able to do that, as well as you accommodate the new applications? That's the challenge, right? So that is very, very important that you have brownfield deployments, not only greenfield deployments in the cloud that need to be supported.
Yes, thanks very much, Amir. That's a great point in terms of not everybody out there in terms of in the customer world and the enterprise world is at the same stage of their cloud journey, and some are having to pull forward, mainframe applications, AS400 applications. We say it in the insurance industry still today. So it's a great point. Now on to Vijoy. I know and Amir set it up nicely for you. You mentioned the importance of cloud native and the shift to cloud native. I wonder if you could talk about what that means for the customer and what that means for the infrastructure they require, and also the operational changes that are occurring within many of these enterprises, and how important solutions are in that context.
No, absolutely. And I think just to like hammer on that complexity statement again, is actually much worse than what Steve and Amir talked about. If you think about it, what's happening right now is there's evolution happening on two axes. The x-axis to me is geographical. So everybody was in like private clouds or on-prem, whatever you want to call it, self-hosted. And then there was this big movement towards let's go public cloud, and that's all that matters. And let's move towards the left, go public cloud. And then now we're looking at the balkanization of cloud, which is everybody is having their own, every country has their own governance and legal requirements and so on and so forth. So we are moving back into self-hosted, private, in-country, but further and further out to the right. We are actually going, there are edge locations because we are working on data sets. And to Amir's point, I mean, you're looking at data sets, you want to drive insights, and you basically want to throw it away because guess what? Shoving it back all the way to the public cloud and bringing it back again when you need it is super, super costly, right? So just that data movement is super costly. It might be, there might be legal issues, governance issues, and so on. So you want to have data gravity, you want to have insights which are local. And then these things which are sitting in our hands are getting more and more effective over time. So there's a lot of computation happening on those handhelds as well. So there's this x-axis, which is almost like a cached environment where you might do computations anywhere and actually have data consistency across that x-axis. That's complexity number one. And then the complexity number one is on the number two is on the y-axis, which is what I talked about earlier. You're moving from bare metal, which was either monolithic, which was bare metal, or virtualization. Both were monolithic environments, to cloud native, which is composable, which is either microservices containers or serverless. And maybe in the future, low code, no code, whatever it happens to be. Developers are lazy. They will want better abstraction. They want to go higher up the stack. I mean, that's something that you cannot stop. So you have this space, X and Y, which is complicating things like crazy. So in this kind of an environment, everything that Steve and Amir talked about, the cloud operating model, all of that is valid. I would say this is driving a bunch of things. One is the whole operating model is changing, which means you don't have a database admin. For example, you have SREs that handle thinner and thinner services, which means your organizational structure is changing because you don't have database admins. You have SREs that tackle thinner and thinner things. You have development teams that are developing services, not databases as a whole. So operational model is changing. The SRE model is coming in full force. And you have this complexity in two axes. The one thing I would say that is a silver lining in all of this is, and I think either it was one of the panelists who mentioned it or Brad, you did, but declarative models are the way to go forward in all of this, because what you're telling, you need to build systems and you need to tell the system, take me from point A to point B. Not how you get from point A to point B, but just get me to point B. And I think that's the way that as an industry, we need to evolve towards. That'll be the way we abstract complexity and make it simple, but it's a hard problem. And it needs it needs the startups, it needs the big companies, it needs the hyperscalers, all of us to collaborate to make that happen. But that's the only way that'll abstract out the complexity and make things simple for the customer.
Thanks very much, Vijoy. And Oliver, coming from Verizon, the problems are similar, but you might have a different perspective on it from a service provider vantage point, or not. I'd love to hear what you have to say on the topic.
No, very similar. Great discussion. I did just quickly look up sandals on my device here, but it came up straight away with all exclusive holidays for 2 people in love, which was quite nice. So I thought I'd mention that. So perhaps we don't talk about love enough here, and in this pandemic age. But no, right. What the guys have said is fantastic. And look, if you take an even bigger step back, right, we've seen a lot of this before. I started my career coding AXE10 telephone exchanges in Erlang, funnily enough, to talk about declarative languages, and I never thought I'd say that again. But when we evolved C7 signaling and IN networks, and a lot of these network trends have been seen before. And of course, the balkanization, the regional governance, the wiretapping, the everything that goes on per country in this sort of in the nationalist world that we live in, and that we might be somewhat returning to at the moment geopolitically. But so we've seen a lot of this, and it's happening now, but on a larger scale with the internet, right? And with the one common denominator that we have here, which is, from a technical point of view, which is IP. And absolutely from a practical point of view, as Vijoy pointed out, we're connecting users and apps, right? But so this is happening. If you step back, we're all building, everyone in the game here, a giant utility. We're just nowhere near finished building it yet, to Amir's point. And there's a lot of chasing the ball, right? Not looking at the game, and that's inevitable. And big business does that. It's got the money, and and on a certain day it decides to go and go cloud, right? And then go zero trust, or go SD-WAN, and you can all have your opinion on where that'll end up. And but the one thing that's noticeable is that it's relentless and it won't wait. I think that's true. We have shifted very much from a supply side market to a demand side market. I mean, that is absolutely massively true. So whereas in the past we could build technologies at a certain speed and supply them into the market, really at probably without taking, jumping a few steps, maybe waiting a little longer to get things. I know we were always slow, but maybe waiting to get things perhaps a little more standardized and a little more ready for the market. We cannot do that now. We're being dragged forward, and not just by the enterprise customers, but by their customers. So this supply side digital market means that we have to move quickly, forcing the whole agile movement, forcing things to us to really look ahead. And you could actually say all of the hyperscalers being even priced, on the difference between the .com boom and now is that those companies were all priced probably at their market value at the time. All of the hyperscalers now are somewhat priced for what they might do in the future. So we have increased the clock speed, something chronic at the moment. But coming back down to earth a little bit more, so we're building out this commodity, this utility, and all of the complexities the guys mentioned here have to be solved for, right? And they have to be solved for at scale. And you talked about customers. I talked to many customers. Some of them don't realize yet that these are large customers, don't realize yet that this problem is hitting them, or they do, but it's lost in their sort of developer land, because that landscape is a little crazy. And I like that quote, I think it was Vijoy said, developers are lazy, right? And let's not get started on our dear developer friends and the whole world of coding. That's another conference. But yes, they're not generally speaking system engineers. They're not generally speaking network engineers. And I mean that in this sort of robust longevity sense of building things at scale that will work for a long time and that are federated, right? And that deal with these kind of complexities. That's good because they work quickly and build things that solve business problems immediately. Bad because you'll get fragmentation and then you get cost and complexity. And we're in this environment at the moment. As these clever people on the panel here, you know, and others, these new breed of providers, you know, come up with solutions together with some of our clever people as well. We are definitely going to be, you know, looking at offering these kind of services so that enterprise customers, wherever we can make DevOps simpler, take cost out of platforming, take cost out of, you know, the complexity of multi-cloud, we'll be doing that. So that was a long way of saying, yes, I agree with everyone.
Thanks very much, Oliver. And then we'll move on to the second stage of the panel discussion. And we'll talk about some of the, we've talked about some of the challenges already, but I want to talk about the business benefits that enterprises are getting from this that you're seeing. And you know, some of them may seem obvious, but some of them may be less obvious. And I think this is a great opportunity to really dig down into the benefits and the value, right? So not just operational benefits, although I know those definitely come into play, but we'll talk about the business benefits that customers are getting from the technology. Amir, let's start with you.
That's a very good point. I mean, from the business perspective, I think people are facing the challenge where, you know, it was okay for the network to be slow, right? And now that people are getting used to the cloud, they know how quickly they can adopt and deploy newer types of applications in their environment and start offering it to the broader community. The challenge is that network becomes a hindrance in that adoption today, right? And so the benefit from the business perspective is huge, as one of our customers says, that we need to move at the business, speed of the business, not at the speed of the network. And that's what we are changing. That equation is completely changing now, that you can deploy these global networks within minutes or hours rather than months or years that it used to take, right? So people went through this transformation, you know, as they're adopting to the cloud. They deployed, number one phase was colo facilities, right, with hardware-based solutions, where you connected your data center to the colo, from the colo into the cloud, right? That took them approximately 12 months to 2 years to deploy, right? And then they realized that merely brought them to the edge of the cloud. But my cloud applications are residing deeper into the cloud, and I don't know how to handle my network as my complexity is growing inside the cloud. So what do? I try to do it on my own. So DIY solutions came up, right? And every customer was doing it on their own. That was the second phase. That still took them 6 months to 12 months to adopt a single cloud, right? And that was not enough to move, to have the agility which is required to move in today's business world, right? So now everybody wants these as a service offerings, right? Where you could mold the solution to the requirements or match it with the requirements of the business. And that's what we are seeing with the larger and the mid-size and smaller customers today, is that everybody wants to have that agility so that they can offer services quickly to the market.
Absolutely. I think those are all great points. And Vijoy, what are you seeing as the key benefits that customers want to achieve and are achieving as a result of this shift?
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, like I described, I mean, there is a pendulum swing that happened and everybody wanted to move to the cloud. There were reasons for that. I mean, we've talked about operational simplicity, because it's not my headache, it's somebody else's headache. I mean, that's what I'm paying somebody else for. So that was one reason. I mean, from the developer viewpoint, it's again, new capabilities that I could not get from my on-prem provider. That's another benefit. And then the velocity, I think let's not ignore that. The speed at which I could move is actually much faster if I'm picking and choosing APIs that matter to me and my app, rather than waiting for somebody to provide that to me in my homegrown environment. So I think those are the three big reasons. And then again, we are shifting back and forth and coming back to on-prem and the edge. But I think if you again think about the y-axis here, I don't know if you guys have seen what Cloud Native does to a monolithic app. I mean, it just looks like the COVID-19 virus. I mean, it's it just looks horribly, horribly scary. And you have these nodes and you have these edges, and it's like a behemoth of a hairball, right? And I think you look at that and you would think, why would anybody just do that to themselves, right? I mean, it's just scary to imagine what that would cause to the uptime of your app or to the feature velocity of your app. And actually, it's exactly those statements why one would do it. Because suddenly, when you want to upgrade something, you're not bringing down, there's no maintenance window. You're not bringing down the entire Oracle backend and want to upgrade the Oracle backend just to get on version 17.1.1.1 or something like that, right? So you could upgrade a tiny piece of your app, and maybe 99% of the time, there is no visible hit to the customer, right? If something goes wrong, the blast radius of something goes wrong is really tiny. So your availability numbers go up. It allows for scale because you can scale out piece parts of that application. So I think the benefits of going, I mean, I can go on, but the benefits of breaking down your application, making it multi-SaaS, multi-cloud, cloud native are tremendous. But you need to have the tools and the capabilities to monitor it. So that's why I think the full stack observability piece comes in handy. You need to have discoverability and you need to have security at the API layer all the way down. So you need to have all of those tools from the connectivity, security, observability viewpoint so that you can manage these things properly. But the benefits are huge of doing this.
Excellent. No, I think those are extremely valid points. And Oliver, from your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of our customers coming to you with, certain KPIs, certain benefits, hard benefits they want to achieve, and SLAs and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll always want to offer SLAs where we can, and the traditional connectivity challenge. I see multi-cloud in almost sort of three layers. The connectivity piece, which we got to solve for. There's the sort of multi-cloud management, which is really where a lot of the complexity is that some of the new guys here are solving for, which is how do I handle my user to app to app, policy and sort of federated, if you like, single pane of glass, so that I can just I don't have to be hampered by, as you put it, clouds plural. Now I can start to rein in my my upskilling costs, my my platform costs, and my DevOps costs. Just talking to a friend who's senior guy in procurement at a large enterprise, saying, and he doesn't know technology, but when I mentioned DevOps, he just shook his head and said, he said those good old DevOps engineers walking around in their jeans. This is obviously pre-COVID, but they're the lifeblood. They're like the creatives at an ad agency, probably. They are the lifeblood of what enterprises need to focus on, which is their brand, their intellectual property, up the stack, all of the apps, their customer experience, and but the complexity to offer these guys everything they want in a cloud, wherever that cloud may be. I think to Vijay's point, the edge journey is kind of inevitable as cloud spreads itself from hyperscalers to the edge and networks become, cloudified from the bottom up. They're two sides of the same coin, really. But the enterprises are just shaking their heads with all of this complexity that's growing and growing. And so they are looking for the as a service model. I think to Steve's great sandals analogy, the enterprises at some point fell in the past, on a certain day, fell in love with the cloud. And what did they fall in love with? The utility, the usability, and the pay-as-you-go ability, sort of, that the cloud, and everyone went, that's the oxygen I want to talk about now. That is, that takes all the oxygen in the room. No CIOs go to their business units and talk about the WAN anymore or the network. They want to talk about this usability to enable business. But it's not all available in just because of A, location, like Vijoy pointed out, and B, it's getting more complex with multi-cloud. So businesses are definitely asking for that. And ultimately, You know, look, it's still about cost, right? We're still mostly stuck on the cost side of the equation with most enterprises. We want to be on the profit side, the revenue side, and we increasingly are getting our spend, you know, and our share of that, whether it's 5G and MEC and getting more vertical, right? But we're mostly on the cost side. So the more that we can show agility and remove cost or complexity out of what's emerging, the better. And, you know, customers want that at the connectivity layer, the sort of multi-everything layer, but multi-cloud layer. And lastly, I didn't mention the user experience layer, right? It's got to be presented in a single pane of glass with the right APIs, the right pick and mix so that you get the service, okay? And yeah, we're seeing it from a lot of customers. Not all of them, you know, are able to articulate perhaps the problem like the guys here are, but it's definitely the next big challenge.
Fair enough, and thanks, Oliver. I was going to say, you guys have been very kind and respectful to one another, but Sandals has really taken a beating today. Probably there won't be much customer acquisition going on that front. Now I want to hand it over to Steve. Steve, you've seen at Aviatrix a wide range of customers. I wonder if you could speak to the commonality of what they're trying to achieve and also some of the differences.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the reason why we all agree on this panel is this is a transformation that's happening. This is a business transformation that's happening, and we all see that, right? We're talking to customers, we absolutely see that, and this is driven not by the infrastructure teams. The infrastructure teams didn't wake up one day and say, "Let's go do cloud. Wouldn't that be fun?" No, they fought this cloud thing for years. Why? Because that's what infrastructure teams do. They do not want to do anything new, because they're going to get fired, because the risk of doing something new is just far too great. So they're gonna hold on as long as they can. The business benefit is a driver of the most fundamental driver of every organism in life: survival, right? That is what every organism, the number one thing is survival. Number two is reproduction. Number one, survival. That's what is driving this. This is the business people. This is the board, the CEO saying we have an existential threat to the survival of our company. And it's not from the other legacy vendors. You know, banks aren't worried about other banks. They're worried about the neobanks. They're worried about the people that have digitally transformed and have leveraged cloud and have the word that everybody's talked about here, which is agility. Because it's all about driving the business. And if I'm competing with people that aren't playing by the rules that we set up 30 years ago, where we do things in the time frame of years, and they're doing things in hours and days, we're going to die. And so that is a huge business benefit. And that's what's driving it. And so all the things in the infrastructure, I like to say the application rocks, the infrastructure rolls. Like, you have to go and follow the app. And the app is what the business cares about. And the agility of being able to roll these things out quicker. You see what's happened with COVID. It's just accelerated this movement into cloud. And so the number one thing is agility. We all talk about that. That is the business benefit. How do I do that? Now, from an infrastructure perspective, is, okay, I need it simple, right? Complexity is the killer of speed. I've got to automate. I've got to automate. I've got to get the human out of the way. I've got to use Terraform. I've got to go and have APIs. I've got to automate all this stuff. And oh, by the way, I have to operationalize this. I need visibility. I need controls. I need security controls. I need performance controls. I have to be able to double, triple, quadruple click down if I need to understand what's going on. And this is the problem with as a service and what the cloud providers, this is part of the Sandals analogies. Guess what they say? You don't need to know. What do you mean I don't need to know? Oh, you don't need to know. It's a service. And you go, well, what happens if something goes wrong? They say, well, nothing will go wrong. And you go, well, what happens if something goes wrong? And they say, nothing will go wrong. And you have this standoff. And the problem is enterprises are the ones that need to know. I need to know. I have to have that visibility. I have to have that control. Now I need it in a simple and an automated way so I can, scale this thing out quickly and have that agility. But I need to know. And you know what? There's a lot of people that love, I hate to pick on sandals again, a lot of people that love sandals. Not me, right? Why? Because I'm a discerning client. I don't want red wine. I don't want white wine. And oh, by the way, they talk about abundant beverages. Guess what, Oliver? If you go there, you cannot get a buzz at Sandals. I tried and I drank and I drank and I drank and I drank. There's no alcohol in those drinks. So if that's what you like, go to the CSPs and go to other people that have you know, a SaaS model, because that's what you're going to get. Every enterprise I know is like me, and they don't like Sandals.
There we go.
Man, I'm not going to Sandals ever again.
There you go.
So I think Brad, those are great points, and you know the challenge is that, you know, again, if you can't bring the business agility to the enterprises, it's going to be a huge issue for them on an ongoing basis. So what they're looking for, to summarize, is simplicity. They want agility. They want control over their environment so that they can come up with the policies which meet their compliance and governance requirements. And cost is another major issue, right? So they want to be able to reduce the cost. And the fifth element that I would say is security, right? To streamline the security across the environments. And it's fundamentally important to the enterprises because there's a hodgepodge of stuff that they have to do today. And of course, of any solution, if you don't provide the control for the detail-oriented folks, where you can have your routing policies or intercompany routing or, you know, intersegmentation routing and all the detailed stuff that the customers have been used to in the existing environments, then you are not able to do justice to it. And I would go back to the analogy that people are doing segmentation in the cloud based on static policies. You'd fat finger 3 commands and your network comes crashing down. People forget that there's, you know, that you can create loops very easily in those environments. And, you know, so you create a loop in the environment. This is a mission critical environment. Your whole network goes down, all applications go down. So that's how important this infrastructure is. And that's something that is needed by the enterprise, a solution that not only is agile, which does things very, very quickly, but at the same time gives all the elements that they're looking for.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think, Amir, you made the point, and Steve made the point, and others made the point earlier, is that one of the challenges in the first stage of cloud was you could have agility, but, you know, control would be too much of a drag on the agility. I think now what we're talking about, and what many of you panelists have talked about today, is there's a way of reconciling the two, so that it doesn't involve a trade-off between the two. You can have both. You can get agility with control. And that's,
exactly.
If I can just chime in a little bit, I think this is where we also need to be careful, because control is the harbinger of complexity. So we just need to be careful as to how much control and how we provide that control. And that's why I go back to my declarative comment earlier, because providing policy is important. And when we say declarative and intent-based and all of those things, there are various levels of intent. I mean, is it configuration intent? Is it design intent? Is it topology intent? I mean, you can have intent at various layers. And so the policy layer, the design layer, is the right place to provide intent, to provide the controls. Anything beyond that drives complexity. So that's one comment I would make. And then building it out in layers is the other way to think about this. Because just like SD-WAN, and all of us have SD-WAN solutions here, just like SD-WAN does not remove the need for laying out intercontinental fiber, there needs to be layers that needs to be built up on the stack. So what SD-WAN does, and what a service mesh would do, and what an actual physical network would do, I mean, these things need to be built out nicely in simple ways that provide declarative policy intent, and that's the way to drive this architecture going forward.
Excellent. No, thank you. I think we'll move on now to the third discussion point, which is now we get to talk about how you solve the problem, right? So we've talked about the problem, we've talked about the benefits customers can accrue from addressing these challenges and problems successfully. But now I know that the panelists here, you all come at it from different perspectives, and you all have different approaches to solving the problem, which is great, because I can think of some other markets not too long ago where they were fairly uniform in terms of the architectures and the way the approach to solving the problem. But I think one of the things that's very exciting about the multi-cloud networking and connectivity space is the variety of approaches, right? There's some very clear alternatives that customers have, and they can select the one that is most suited to their environments and their requirements. So we'll start with Vijoy now. I wonder if you could talk about how you solve this problem, Vijoy.
Yeah, so I think we've all been talking about some of the solutions already. So to summarize, I would say, I mean, yes, the movement to cloud is going to be there. I mean, to Steve's comment there is a Cambrian explosion happening right now. That is going to take place, that the movement is going to take place, and it's going to take place across that x-axis that I talked about. The movement to cloud native from bare metal and monolithic is going to take place no matter what we decide to do as infrastructure providers. That's going to happen. So in this space, how do we make sure that our customers' journeys are simple and straightforward? And so going back to building it out in layers, making sure that every layer has clean APIs, and those APIs are the ones that are tickled and not architecturally munge these layers together. So that's principle number one. Making sure that these things are built in cloud native ways so that you have availability, you have velocity or agility, you have blast radius protection. So all of these things are important, because suddenly, like I said, apps are now distributed across the globe. And so a fat fingering, like Amir was pointing out, is going to have massive consequences across. And one of the things that we realized, and this was back at Google, is you make a change at one point, and it's like the butterfly effect. You don't even think that is going to impact something else like across the globe, and that does happen. So being safe when we do these things is critically important. So that's where all of these design principles come into play. And then because these apps are widely distributed, I think going back to from the app all the way down. So making sure that your APIs are connected and there is declarative definitions of those APIs and how you want to connect them. Your security policies are connected at the API layer, and you define your policies at that layer. But then making sure that things are threaded all the way down. And to ensure that things are humming nicely, your full stack observability is key here, because you want to observe what's happening at the API layer, at the app layer, what's happening across your network from users to your distributed app, and then again, all the way down to the physical infrastructure, because believe me, all of this needs to hit the road, and the road is your fiber and your switches and your routers. Those things are not going anywhere. I mean, as much as we all like to talk about the API layer, that's what's carrying the internet. And we are back to where we started, because I've seen those things drive the hyperscalers as well. I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road. So we need to thread all the way down from the API to the bare metal and do it in a layered approach.
Thanks very much, Vijoy. And it's a nice transition you actually provided, because now we're going to move over to Oliver. And Oliver, I would imagine, being at Verizon, the importance of transport and transit is absolutely key in this equation. So I wonder if you could talk about what it is Verizon is bringing to the table in this context.
Well, look, everyone should probably buy shares in fiber companies if they don't already, because 5G is driving a lot of fiber, right? And I think but I'm going to give a slightly different answer. I'm going to say that it's not a technology answer. I mean, it is right, and we're evolving the technology. But look, probably the big value, apart from investing billions of dollars, which I have to say, to put my Verizon hat on, huge billions of dollars in every year in Verizon. Understanding enterprise customers is probably one of the biggest values. Look, technologies come and go, they evolve, they all perform a job. We get the luxury sometimes of getting it right as a whole industry with our technology, and sometimes kludge is too hard a word, but look, the internet itself had plenty of kludges, if you like, and some people view them as terrible mistakes, and other people say that they make the internet very usable, for example, and so the technologies will come and go, but and there are many roads, right, moving forward, many paths. There's the DIY model we talked about, which is just inevitable at times. there's many different ways you can layer on your solutions to, you know, to digitizing your entire enterprise. We at Verizon would, of course, would basically state that unless you come to a big global company that has a lot of engineering skills, we will get you there faster and, if you want, safer. Because you can go and string together a lot of different technologies if you want right now, but you can try and do that, but you may get it right, you may get it wrong, and by all means do it. But if you want longevity and you want to really do things properly, you are going to need to go to companies that know how to scale, know how to operate in multiple countries, have done it before, are doing it to themselves, and will inherit and you know, vendor agnostic, will inherit and use the best and the cleverest, like these guys are talking about, in our solutions. So I'm going to give you a kind of a, you know, an engineering global big company answer to make you, and I think that's important.
Okay, that's fine. I know we're running into Q&A, so maybe very briefly, Steve and Amir, if you could. I know, Steve, you've talked about the use of Terraform and Terraform providers in terms of, you know, the mechanism that you use to provide the solution, and I know, Amir, you know, you have a very much a network as a service SaaS approach. But very briefly, if you guys could summarize, and then we'll move to Q&A.
Yeah, I just think the first thing is, as everybody knows, it has to be cloud native, right? I call, you know, the old world stuff is cloud naive, right? It sounds the same, one letter difference, but it makes all the difference in the world. So you have to understand the native constructs of the cloud. It's just different. So that's number one. And part of that being cloud native is that, you know, the APIs and Terraform and everything we've talked about has to be simple. It has to be automated, all those kind of things. I think for us, for Aviatrix, you know, it's not just to and across clouds, but it's also within clouds. And that's kind of the analogy of the sandals thing is it's not just about getting to sandals. It's when you get there, that's when the trouble really starts. So we tend to, in the industry, think it's, well, we just got to fly there. We just got to get there, and then everything will be fine. It's not going to be fine. And so it's across, and it's also within, and you need a platform that enables people to have a common architecture with a common set of services, whether I'm an AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, Alibaba, doesn't matter, that understands and programs the native services that those clouds provide, and then augments with advanced services around networking, security, or then with a global common single pane of glass for visibility across all those clouds as well as on-prem. I need that networking platform. And that's what Aviatrix does. And then where we're going with this is we are building, as an industry, an autonomous infrastructure, which the networking is part of that, and Aviatrix will be that layer of that stack that is going to optimize the application, which is what the customer really cares about: performance, security, actually, and cost. And that was a metric that we didn't have to worry about on-prem. And you see it with cars, people, you know, it's going to go autonomous. So it's that infrastructure is going to be, you know, through APIs talking to each other, and it's going to do that in a very self-optimized way that around the optimization of the application. And that's where we're going at Aviatrix.
Thanks very much, Steve. And then very briefly, Amir, and we'll get to Q&A, because I know there are questions awaiting you folks. So there we go.
Yeah, in addition to what Steve said, I agree with those points, but at the same time, you know, you need to be able to build something which is global in reach, right? And because even the smallest companies can have partners who are sitting somewhere else, and they need to be able to move very, very quickly to accommodate those environments, or whether it's mergers and acquisition of stuff. So I would say that 2 points. One is the customer needs, right? You always have to look at the customer needs. And the second piece is how the technology is evolving, right? And the architecture needs to meet those both requirements, right? And take into account how the clouds are evolving. I would say routers are no longer needed. I won't say that, you know, technologies are not needed. There's no technology religion, right? As we used to say early days at Cisco. But the way we build the solutions is going to be purely software. Cloud sits on your on-prem, cloud sits in the edge, cloud is going everywhere. So you'll have utility, which will be the network, then you'll have all the intelligence services residing in the cloud. That's what we are taking advantage of. So as a service solution, which is simplistic, but at the same time meets the requirements of the advanced users, control from agility perspective, as well as compliance, GDPR requirements as an example, where the data resides, it's fundamentally important. And be able to manage that environment in a very simplistic manner is fundamentally important. And so that's why we bring in this solution, which is called Cloud Network as a Service, which spans the globe and provides the capabilities which are seamless from security perspective as well. So simplicity is very important. Streamlining is very important. Otherwise, your network will not be secure. And the industry needs to evolve, and we are transforming that market.
Thanks very much, Amir. And now we'll move to Q&A. I think we've got some questions awaiting the panelists.
We cut now to a selection of questions from the press audience. One of the questions was as follows. Understandably, a lot of attention is being paid to the re-architecture of the hybrid cloud network in order to address application availability and optimize performance. But how important is it to also consider the migration management strategy, given how many CFOs have had their budgets burned by a lemming-like plunge into the cloud, only to find out how expensive cloud services can be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and of course, it's a broader question. But are there any panelists who want to move in and provide an answer to that? Just give me a quick signal in terms of who wants to step up and answer that one.
I'll have a quick couple of.
There you go.
Words.
Oliver's gonna have a go. Yes.
Yeah. Let's try. Right. It is a great question. That plenty of money gets burnt in good ideas at the beginning, right? And but look, cloud computing as a concept offers so many good things. That's why it became so hot. However, in application and in practice in the world, it's only at the beginning, right? That's why we have this movement to the edge. That's why we've been evolving data centers and we have private cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So, this rush to the cloud, again, as I said, people chase the ball and aren't able always to see the whole game that's playing out. So budgets have been burned. And again, as I said, that's why at Verizon, seeing the bigger picture is very, very important. And understanding that it's not just about the technology. You've got to know where the technology is in its life cycle and where the whole of, let's call it networking, whether that evolves to, something higher order or not, where that is in its life cycle as well. We've seen it all before and we'll see it all again, no doubt. But so learning and working with how you migrate enterprises to the cloud, to different clouds, to the edge, and giving them tools to do that is very, very important. That's why these tools and these capabilities are that these guys are offering are very important, because if they can reduce the cost and reduce the complexity, they're good.
Yeah, this is very much a kind of governance question, right? I mean, it's about how you govern your shift to cloud and multi-cloud. Yeah. Sorry, Amir. Yeah.
Exactly, Brad. And and that's the reason you need to have the control over these things and automate things. Because let's take an example. An employee goes and spins up an instance in the cloud. They may end up spinning up extra large instance where they could be able to get away with a medium instance, and that's where the cost comes from. You don't know who's using what and how do you control that, and there are tools being put together to be able to address that. So at least from the networking perspective, the level of automation that we are bringing is based on your needs, right? It needs to be elastic. So it goes up and down based on your needs, right? And that's fundamentally important to control the cost going forward, whether it's networking or whether it's compute, storage, and other elements of the network. So what we are doing to the network is, as a service, bringing something similar to what Azure and AWS did to your compute and storage and databases and applications. We're doing that to the network, but taking it to the next level because we had the luxury of learning from the mistakes of the past so that we can cater to the needs of the customer. It's very, very important to control the cost going forward.
Yeah, hey, Brad, this is Steve. And Steve Broadhead, your question is exactly right. So, prior to 2 years ago, IT wasn't involved. IT were the bad guys that we went around. That was called shadow IT. and people were running around naked drinking tequila, right? And they were having a grand old time. It was fun and games, man. It was beautiful. I don't worry about compliance, auditing, security. We were having a hell of a time. And then 2 years ago, everyone said, okay, this is not fun and games anymore. We are now going to the cloud. Thank you for your help, Mr. DevOps and all you guys running around naked. We're being effing melon right now, right? We don't do that. So the big boys are in charge now. Now, we thank you. We need to maintain that philosophy of DevOps and agility. We get it. We learned our lesson. We're not going back to the 1994 horrible complex model that we used to have in on-prem client server. We're going to be new, but we can't run around naked drinking tequila. We have to have visibility. We have to have control. We have to operationalize this. That's what happened 2 years ago. And so the question from Steve, you're absolutely right. They had issues, and now they're realizing, okay, this is our strategic architecture. We have to do this right. This is not fun and games anymore.
Absolutely. We talk about DevOps, but what we're talking about in this context is a reassertion of ops as a governance control on some of the debauchery that you spoke about, Steve.
Yeah, and I can't lose that velocity and that agility. Absolutely, that's requirement number one.
Yep.
Customer told me the other day it's that the word agility is now part of mission critical. And that's so true. So how do I do that, but yet bring back some of that visibility and control that I used to have in my infrastructure on-prem?
Absolutely. And I think Vijoy, you're saying something as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, and to Steve's question earlier, it also feels like a one-way street, right? Because the tolls on this freeway are asymmetric, right? Once you go in, it's very hard to come out. So when you want to go in with a cloud provider, when you want to move in all your data to your AWS or GCP, Azure, wherever, you need to be a little cautious in picking the right partner as well. And so doing the what if analyses on what will it get me if I move my workloads there. That's some of the products that we have in Intersight and AppD allow you to do that, because you need to be pretty sure that once I move in, I'm good to go for the next couple of years, and then moving out is going to be a problem. So it's not just the data costs, and it's not just a cost analysis, but it's also a performance analysis. Should I pick A or B? Because it depends on where my customers are and where the data centers from that providers reside. So it's not a simple, just an onboarding question. I hope it was, but it's not. It's a much more complex analysis that you need to do.
During this Q&A, another question was this: what is the clear differentiation between these two hot startups, Alkira and Aviatrix?
Well, we'll put it to our two panelists from those respective companies. Amir, if you want to be first.
Yeah, I'm just getting my bag of popcorn. Hold on.
Steve, you're welcome to go first if you want.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess my view of this is this is going to be a monstrous. This is monstrous. This is it. This is a transformation that, look, Aviatrix is going to be minimum $20-30 billion market cap, probably $70-80 billion. I'm sure Alkira, I don't really know what they do exactly. I'm sure they're going to be successful too, just because this is just a monstrous transformation of the computing model. What I will tell you is the customers that we talk to, I'm going to make another prediction. And I'm generally, it's a curse, but I'm usually right. And I'm usually a couple of years ahead of everybody else. People now see multi-cloud is happening. 2 years ago, when I talked about multi-cloud, everybody thought, oh, that's just, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Now everybody goes and says, okay, yeah, now I understand. I think the other thing that's going to happen is for infrastructure, a SaaS model is going to become a four-letter word. And that's actually an old view of how you would do things. Every single one of our customers, and again, like I said, I've got 500 enterprise customers, do not want it as a service. And the reason is because exactly what Vijoy, you were saying, you've got to be very careful. I want my infrastructure. Now I want it to look like SaaS. I want it to be simple. I want it to be agile. I want all the benefits of SaaS, but I don't want it as a service, because I want to know that I have my infrastructure that's optimized for my infrastructure. And oh, by the way, if I decide I want to run an AWS or Azure or whatever, I want to be able to go and do that. And I don't want to rely, I'm not going to trade one black box of the favorite CSP for another black box, right? Two black boxes on top of each other is even worse than one black box. I need that visibility and that control, and I've got to be able to have that fine print. When you talk to an enterprise, there's two words they love: visibility and control. That just drives them. They love that. And prior to 2 years ago, everybody loved sandals, right? They didn't need the visibility and control. They were fine with red wine, but not the enterprise. I need that visibility and control. Now, don't push me back to the old horrible complex Cisco model of the 90s, right? I don't want that. I have to have the DevOps model, but I still need that visibility and control. And that only comes from having your own infrastructure and having the best of both worlds. So that people don't understand that about Aviatrix. And in 2 years, I guarantee if we do another one of these events, everyone will go and say, "Wow, Steve, you were right." That's
thanks very much. And there's Amir. Amir, please respond.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think the key is that moving things slightly beyond where they are is not helping the customer, right? So similar architectures to before, where you have to deploy a node in every VPC to get any level of intelligence, or build your infrastructure in the way that old technologies were built, or bringing out a technology which is similar to how the network management solutions used to be, where you were always lagging behind or depending upon the equipment vendors, providers. Whatever they offered, you had to accommodate your solution to bring out that capability to the market. And that's why we took the approach of building our own infrastructure in the public cloud providers' infrastructure, so that we didn't have to rely on 10 different clouds to bring out a feature. And how difficult it has been historically to bring out features, even if you have cross-department dependency, let alone cross-company dependency, right? And that's where I think the struggle will be in majority of the market. And that's why we took a very unique approach, where for the first time in the history of computer networking industry, we are building a solution which is cloud native, which is, solves the cloud as well as hybrid environment problems with full visibility and control, right? So let's take an example of MPLS. MPLS took away the layer 3 control from you. We are bringing that back to the market. A part of that was done as a Viptela solution, where the control plane was extracted and put into the cloud, right? So that your routing control could be back because you wanted to use multiple transports underneath, right? So similarly here, what you need to do is abstract out the underlying clouds, not necessarily the transports, but at the same time provide more control to the enterprise if they need it. There are levels of enterprise requirements, right? Some customers do not want complete control. Some customers do want complete control. So you want to build a solution which is simple, which is agile, which is offered as a service, so that you can move into an environment in minutes and build your infrastructure literally across the globe in minutes, right? And do the testing for 2 days and you are in business. Move at the speed of the business, not at the speed of deploying multiple nodes or doing policies in a very simplistic manner where you cannot even do segmentation and you have to do static policies to build that infrastructure out, right? So we are trying to avoid all the pitfalls of the other vendors who started before us, or the legacy vendors or cloud providers that so we did a very deep analysis, and we took a clean sheet of paper and we solved the customer problems in a very step-by-step manner. That's what you get from Alkira, is as a service solution with control, with governance capabilities built in, with day 2 operations, with strong, as Vijoy was saying, declarative policy control, full visibility of what applications you're running, full visibility of how you control your infrastructure from security perspective, and all the other applications like how do I integrate third-party, best of breed solutions into my environment. And that cannot be static going anymore. It takes you ages to get there. Simple environments, which are point-to-point or very simplistic, you can get away with doing it yourself. I'll give you an example of firewall deployment. Right? Today, you cannot even maintain state across the globe of if the traffic hits one firewall, it has to go through the other firewall. Normally, the firewalls are deployed in line. Or the elasticity of firewalls. How do you bring them automatically up or down? Or the high availability of firewalls. So that level of third-party services integration needs to be done so you can have common security across all your environments. That's where you need visibility. That's where you need control over what applications are running, and you need to be able to do it based on APIs like Terraform, and so we provide full capabilities from the API perspective as well. It's a very comprehensive solution with deep level of control for your environment.
I want to thank both of you for answering that question forthrightly, and I think you both made some great points as to how you address the problem. You both addressed the problem, and you were very clear on your distinguishing characteristics. So thank you very much for that. I think this was a lively and informative session, and I hope the audience shares that view. Thanks again, Oliver, Steve, Amir, Vijoy. I'm tremendously grateful for your participation today and for the insights you shared with the audience.